Hello everyone, welcome to the course Disability Studies in India, Historical, Social and Culture Perspectives. So, as you know what we are talking about in this course, we are talking more about disability studies and we are picking up all the important concern that is associated with women with disabilities, right? In this module, we are talking about Indian feminism and disabilities. Let me make a 2 point first, right? Or before I make 2 points, let me talk about what we discussed previously. Like what are the points that were made previously? There are many points I made, but one of the important points that I would like to tell you is that the problem associated with women with disabilities are different, unique, which is not the case with men with disabilities, which is also not the case with women. We also noticed that there are violence acts which fail to address the concern of women with disabilities. You're getting my point. So sometimes what we understand that it is because they are not conceptualized. They are not conceptualized in our mind. They do not figure in our mind. As if their existence do not matter to us. For us, they don't exist. They are just living the life, they are burdened. Let's not talk about them. Let's not discuss that. Maybe, I don't know why, but there are many reasons. Maybe they are less in numbers, no one speaks behalf of them. And also, the dominant attitude that we have culturally that they're inferior. Right? So keeping this view in the mind, how are we going to fight against that? What are the attempt we are going to make to challenge this? That's what we are discussing. Another important concern that I was thinking to share with you is, you remember there is something called masculinity studies, right? There is something called masculinity studies. What is this for? Because the gender, the role that is assigned to men, the role, cultural, social role assigned to men to remain masculine is also oppressing men. Think about it. Right? That is why we have a masculinity studies which is going to challenge the expectations of people they have towards men. Because that is oppressive. It is it's not giving them space to live the way they want. So one thing is quite clear, my dear students and friends. Norm is not in anyone's favor. Maybe with certain regions someone is privileged, but it is not because it is keeping you in the mind. It's just because it happened that you got privilege. There would be a time, there would be a system when this way, the process of giving privilege to some community society will change. So injustice is injustice. One has to fight against this. One does not have to sit silently, right? So masculinity studies is trying to tell you that how we are also discriminated. Men are also discriminated in the patriarchal setup. They are also feeling oppressed in the patriarchal setup, which says that privileges to men, they are happy, it is more inclining towards superiority status of a man. No, that's not true. There are a number of men, and that is why we got masculinity studies. So, in the end of the previous lecture, I was trying to say you the same thing, that we have to work against these oppressive norms, these oppressive expectations, oppressive assigned gender roles, not only for disabled people, but for everyone. If you want a better society, if you want a wonderful society, if you want a society which includes everyone equally, which has a space for everyone, then one has to speak against every marginalization. One has to speak against every oppressive structure. That's why you see that I have been talking about also intersectionalities, because disability is something you cannot say that you will not become disabled. Right? You cannot say this ever. Today or tomorrow, you are going to grow old. Right? So you will fall under that category of disability. Didn't you see that in one of my lectures I was talking about that how initially there are only 7 types of disability, and then we had more than that, 21 types of disability. So what do you think? How is it possible? Because definition of disability changed. Definition of disability changed. It accommodated more people. Cognitive disability was not taken into the account. Now it extended, the definition extended to next level, and people with cognitive disabilities were also included. So think about this. That's very important, very significant. To look at these important points, that how women with disabilities are discriminated, so do not overlook their problems. Their concern must be taken into the account. So that's why in this lecture I am going to talk more extensively how we can engage with their concerns, how we can engage with their problems. What are the other important nuances that has to be taken into the consideration? So let's look at the first slide. So first slide is speaking about Indian feminism. So Indian feminism, like feminist movements worldwide, has evolved over the years, addressing a variety of issues that affect women's life, including social, cultural, economic, and political factors. However, a crucial aspect that has often been marginalized within mainstream feminist discourse in India is the intersection of gender and disability. So, disability as an identity has its own historical, social, and political contours. When combined with the complexity of a being, right, when combined with the complexity of a being, a woman in India, the challenges faced by disabled women become even more pronounced. So, feminism in the Indian context, right? Feminism in the Indian context has traditionally been concerned with issues such as patriarchy, the unequal distribution of resources, sexual violence, and women's rights. However, until recently, disability has largely been absent from mainstream feminist debates. Indian feminist thought, which has been shaped by the struggle of women in patriarchal, caste-based, and deeply traditional society, rarely account for the added layers of marginalization that women with disabilities face. So there is an article by, wait, let me write it, Anita Ghai and Excluded Agenda of Feminism. So there is another person who is also important to know more about it, Nilka Malhotra, and yes, I have been constantly referring to the work of Shilpa Anand, right? So Professor Anita Ghai, Professor Nilka Malhotra, and Dr. Shilpa Anand. What is the point? Why are we talking about it? Like now I have actually talking about the Indian feminism. In the article An Excluded Agenda of Feminism, Ghai is saying that women with disabilities were excluded from Indian feminism. When Indian feminism is talking about the rights, about the concerns of women in India because of the patriarchal society, they are marginalized, they are not getting enough opportunities, they are facing problems, right? So in that case, what are they trying to suggest? That we should speak for the women. But the question is, how do you look? Does that mean women with disabilities are not women? Why didn't you include them? Why didn't you talk about them? That's a politics actually. That is what Anita Ghai is trying to refer. It is the politics because they thought that if we talk about women with disabilities, the concern will be diverted. It will be diverted. There is a lot of problems are going to come up and people will not focus on women's problems and it will not get success. So don't you think it raises two questions? The one, the very intention of Indian feminists who excluded fighting for the rights of a woman against the patriarchal structure which has also oppressed women with disabilities. But it's not taking into account the concern of women with disabilities. So that's why it's very important to look at this article called An Excluded Agenda for Feminism by Anita Ghai. So he has extensively talked about the politics and all that, right? This is what also happens when Chandra Talpade Mohanty is talking about Western feminism, questioning the Western feminism because it did not include colored women. It did not talk about colored women. It only is talking about white women, which are already superior in terms of black women or colored women. So this is all what I see as a power game, right? You mobilize a particular set of a group and you fight for your rights. But it is another way is also saying this, right? One has that concern, so you talk about it, bring the people together who can identify themselves. But you see, but the problem is that how it excluded women with disabilities. That's what I'm talking about. That's a concern I'm raising. Okay. So this is another added layer of a marginalization which people did not think of addressing. Let's look at the next slide. So the next slide I'm talking about, disability in Indian context is often viewed through a medical or charity model lens. I have already discussed this, right? wherein disabled people are seen as individuals needing pity, care, or institutional support. Right? So, this view frequently obscures the social and political dimension of disability, including issues of accessibility, autonomy, and the denial of rights. So, for women with disabilities, the stakes are higher as they are not marginalized due to their disability but also because of their gender. The notion of the disabled woman is often constructed as an anomaly in both the medical and social spheres, reinforcing negative stereotypes about their sexuality, agency, and worth. Indian feminism's focus has historically been on issues such as female education, empowerment, access to healthcare, sexual rights, gender based violence. While these are crucial, feminist discourse in India has tended to exclude the voices of women with disabilities, treating disability as a separate issue rather than integral part of the broader feminist agenda. This is reflected in the way mainstream feminist organizations and movement have failed to engage with disability as a central issue. That's where I'm hinting towards. I'm hinting towards just to tell you that how women with disabilities was treated as if that's a separate agenda. It cannot be the agenda of feminist agenda because it has also different problem politics. But are they not all fighting for the same cause, same concern? Right? Fighting against injustice, fighting against patriarchy, fighting against normative structure, fighting against expectations that people have to women or women with disabilities. But still, they were being overlooked because considered it's a separate agenda. It's not. This agenda cannot be included in the agenda of Indian feminism. You got the point? Let's look at the next slide now. So, next slide is talking about the absence of disability from feminist discourse can be attributed to several factors. Right? This is how I'm going to talk about now, point by point, and just notice that. What is the first? Absence of disability. First, there is a general lack of awareness about the challenges that disabled women face. So, in many feminist circles, disability is often reduced to a problem of physical incapacity rather than a social political issues of exclusion. That is why I say still medical model is relevant, because this thinking can only emerge if you are thinking from the medical model point of view. So, disability is often reduced to a problem of physical incapacity rather than a socio-political issue of exclusion and marginalization. So, disabled women in India often face multiple forms of oppression: caste, class, gender, and disability, which complicates their position within both mainstream society and within the feminist movement. You got my point? So, these disabled women in India, they face multiple forms of oppression. It is caste, it is class, gender, disability. Second, in addition, what we see, Indian feminist narrative have often been shaped by the experiences of urban, educated, upper caste women. This exclusionary model overlooks the realities of disabled women, particularly those from rural areas, low income backgrounds, marginalized caste. So these women face additional barriers, not just in terms of gender and disability, but also in relation to social mobility, access to education, and basic health care. So in recent years, what we have noticed is that there has been a growing movement to address the intersection of disability and feminism in India. The emergence of disability feminism in India is part of broader international trend that recognizes the intersectionality of identity. So the idea that social attitudes such as race, class, gender, disability can be understood in isolation, but must be analyzed in relation to one another. Disability feminism in India challenges the dominant narrative about gender and disability, advocates for the recognition of disabled women as a full agents of change. So one of the important issues that disability feminism in India addresses is the denial of sexual rights to disabled women. In traditional Indian society, women, especially those with disability, are often seen as sexual or assumed to have no interest in sexuality. This belief is not only detrimental to their personal dignity and autonomy, but also leaves disabled women vulnerable to sexual violence. Disability feminism seeks to assert the sexual agency of disabled women, advocate for the policies and practices that ensure their sexual rights and safety. Right? Think about this. So, one of the problems that they were not included in the Indian feminism agenda is because that there was a lack of awareness, and that is why they were not included. Another problem that they are facing, that sexual rights they don't have because they were considered asexual, which tend to consider them, which tend to make them more sexually deprived, and also the violence is more on women with disability because people consider them asexual, so people will not even listen to them even if they speak it out, right? So these are important concerns. So when disabled women started raising their voices, they also speaking about sexual rights. So one stereotype they had to break, and still they have to work on, because still people believe the same, is telling them that they are as so-called normal as other women are. Their disability does not anyway affect their sexuality. Right? The two are not disjointed. They are very much linked. They are sexual agent as well. They have sexual agency that has to be acknowledged. This sexual agency has to be acknowledged when it comes to women with disabilities. All right, let's look at the next slide now. So the next slide I'm talking about, the key concern is the lack of inaccessible infrastructure and education for disabled women. Right? So the physical and social environments are often not designed to accommodate disabled individuals, particularly women. Accessibility in public spaces, educational institutions, and workplaces is often limited, making it difficult for disabled women to live independently or particularly fully in society. Feminists in the disability movement are working to dismantle these barriers, advocating for inclusive policies that ensure disabled women have equal opportunities to access education, employment, and healthcare. Indian feminism in its current form is expanding to include the voices of women with disabilities, recognizing that their struggle is they're not separate, but are interconnected with the issues of gender, caste, and class. So disabled feminism in India seeks to challenge not only the patriarchy, but also the ableism that marginalizes disabled women, demanding their full participation in society as equal citizens. While much work remains to be done, the growing awareness of women with disability as a feminist issue as a crucial step towards achieving the true equality for all women in India. All right. So, what is this talking about? That one has to work in all these important zones. One has to work in terms of education, one has to work in terms of healthcare, one has to work also in terms of inclusive policies, security systems, everything has to be worked. And they're fighting two problems. One, obviously patriarchy, and also the side by side which goes with them is ableism. So they both must be, these two monsters has to be challenged, have to be resisted when it comes to inclusion of women with disabilities. So let's look at the last slide, please. So as the disability right movement gains momentum, right, it is also essential that Indian feminists continue to engage with disability as a central issue. They should also work toward creating a society that is truly inclusive, where the rights of disabled women are recognized and respected. Only then can we achieve a feminism that is truly intersectional, which means, right, disability and also gender. So one that addresses the diverse needs and aspirations of all women, regardless of their physical, mental, or social circumstances. Right? So the key point I was trying to tell you here is that one is ableism and second one is patriarchy. I'm nowhere suggesting that the two are not connected, but rather at one point of time they also intersect to each other, right? So this is what a women with disabilities have to face and struggle when it comes to inclusive space for them. All right. So with this, I would like to conclude my lecture and tell you, my dear students and friends, that women with disabilities had to challenge, had to fight on multiple levels, have to struggle on multiple levels, and they have to fight against a lot of barriers. Then only women with disabilities can be included, right? So with this, I would like to end my lecture here. Thank you so much for your patience and thank you so much for listening to me. Stay tuned with me. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you once again.